Dunga Dandre Nerdu Lana Mepa Yang Dabra Sobe Chanchu Rinpoche Tompra Jo Dala Dala Jebe Dra Nopar Jebe Gek Tarbada Tom Jegen Bardu Jeba Tom Jegizu Jebe Manang Kadan Nabe Zenjen Tom Jedaba Dan Den Dunga Dandre Nerdu Lana Mepa Yang Dombra Sobe Chanchu Rinpoche Dombra Chala Dhamma Jebe Dra Nopar Jebe Ke Tarpadan Tom Je Kempe Bardu Jabra Jeba Tham Jege Sa Jebe Manang Kadang Nyampe Sechen Tom Je Dewa Dan Den Dungyal Dan Den Nerdu Lana Mepaya Dombra Sobe Chanchu Rinpoche Dombra Chala Dhamma Jebe Dra Nopar Jebe Ke Tarpada Tam Che Kempe Bardu Jobra Jeba Tam Jege Su Jebe Manang Kadang Nyampe Senchen Tam Je Deva Dan Den Dungya Dan De Nerdu Lana Mebaya Dombra Sobe Chanchu Rinpoche Dombra Sama Keke Bardu Lunga Yusum Geva Shi Bardu Lunga Yisum Geva Lagu Dine Sinde Nema Santa Sangi Bardu Lunga Yisum Geva Lagu Jodan Sogi Chonam Chanchu Bardu Dani Kyabsu Dagi Jinsu Gibe Sonam Ge Dolam Pinche Sanje Dubraju Sangye Jodan Sogi Jonam La Chanchu Bardu Dani Kyabsuji Dagi Jinsu Gibe Sonam Ge Dolam Pinche Sanje Dubraju Sanje Jodan Sogi Jonam La Chanchu Bardu Dani Kyabsuji Dagi Jinsu Gibe Sonam Ge Nala Pinche Sanje Dubra Nana Kadang Nyampe Senchen Tamche Dewa Dang Dewen Kindan Dambra Gyuji Dunya Dang Dunya Gi Gyudang Dewa Gyuji Dunya Mepe Dewa Dang Ne Drava Gyuji Neding Chadang Nidang Dewe Tang Nyang La Nabra Gyuji Padang Nyampe Senjen Tamje Dewa Dang Dewe Gedan Dambra Gyuchi Dumya Dang Dumya Ki Gedan Dewa Gyuchi Dumya Mebe Dewa Dang Me Dewa Gyuchi Niring Chadang Nidang Dewe Tangyang La Nebra Gyuchi Padang Nyampe Senjen Tamje Dewa Dang Dewe Gindan Dambra Gyuji, Dunya Dang Dunya Gi Gidang Dewa Gyuji, Dunya Mebe Dewa Dame Dewa Gyuji, Nirin Chadang Nidang Dewe Dang Nyam La Nebra Gyuji. In all the worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times. Before each of you, lions among humans, I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind. By the power of this aspiration to noble deeds, all conquerors appear vividly in my mind. With as many bodies as there are atoms in all lands, I prostrate to all you conquerors. In each atom are Buddhas, numerous as atoms, all in the midst of the heirs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharma Dhatu as completely filled with you conquerors in this way. With infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse melodies, I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors, and praise all of you gone to bliss with the best flowers and blessed garlands, best music, ointments, and excellent parasols, finest lamps, and superior incense. I offer to you conquerors. With excellent garments and best fragrances and sandalwood powder, Heap high as Mount Meru, or wondrous offerings perfectly arranged, I offer to you, conquerors. These vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you, conquerors, with the power of conviction and noble deeds, I prostrate and offer to all you conquerors. All the harmful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance, I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds of all conquerors in the 10 directions and the heirs of the Buddhas. Solitary realizers here still in training and beyond, and all wandering beings. You who are lamps of the worlds of the 10 directions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi, all you who are my protectors, please turn the unexcelled wheel of Dharma. With palms together, I earnestly beseech you who may intend to manifest final nirvana, please remain for as many eons as there are atoms in the world, for the happiness and well-being of all wandering beings. Whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate to complete Bodhi. This ground sprinkled with scented waters and strewn with flowers, adorned with the supreme mountain, fog, continent, sun, and moon. I visualize as a Buddha land and offer it. May all wandering beings experience such a pure land. To the Gurus who possess the three kayas, I offer the outer, inner, secret, and thusness offerings. With my body, wealth, and all phenomenal existence, please grant the unsurpassed supreme attainment. Whatever slight virtue I may have gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate it all to complete Bodhi. Om Guru Devada Kinira Namandala Pratijaso. Please turn the wheel of Dharma of the greater, lesser, and common vehicles in accordance with the dispositions and mental capacities of sentient beings. Doji chanting tele naroda mamita popa ruchi tengun kate sunden sawe lame shamsa jula ma yidam chokung aso wade soda ki jen ro kyang jen ki tome zame ke rape tong sumyong na kya tsume kya wadu je chan pa ji tengun pa shaba du tatu sangye kyo le me chi ji lo shi tu je jen nenge mamba sa ne kyang sempa de ku kapra jen ro yu chi ne chan sa pe ma kya sa tong po la ya sen chu keng wa tong ne pe ma ju ne she shu da go go ka tong ma po po ke ke je se ta de ke je la ji she su so gu ru pe ma se de chu ke ye ke po da ne to so san je po ke mo no kan sen chu go mo so dong se pa za wei la me sha la so la. Good morning, everyone. Good evening, if you're in Asia. I am back in the US, but right now in Wisconsin. Got in last evening. So, yeah, good to see everyone. Um, so as I mentioned in the last class, in this next section that we're entering, Shantideva basically is addressing two prevalent views during his time. These are two non-Buddhist way of thinking, of viewing the world, of understanding the meaning of life, so on and so forth. So you can say two different standpoints, two different even philosophies with regards to what is the problem and what is the solution. One way to understand religion in general is that each religion proposes a particular problem. Say, the problem with the world, the problem with us is dot, 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 whatever it is. Some religions say, oh, the problem is because of death, or the problem is because of disobedience. The problem is because of sin, right? So each religion will propose, this is what the problem is. Then, of course, it will then provide a solution and say, well, given that this is the problem, then this is the solution. So in the case of Buddha Dharma, Buddha says the problem is, the most immediate problem, the most obvious problem is this thing called dukkha. Then he says, and this is how you end dukkha. Dukkha, there is dukkha, there is the end of dukkha. And from there, we have the Four Noble Truths. So, so in ancient India, in which the Buddha Dharma is one of many dharmas, dharma is used almost in the sense of religion. So there are different dharmas in India. So there is the Buddha Dharma, and then there's the various other dharmas. So among them, there is the theistic dharma, the dharma that accepts, believes in a theistic, a God figure. So that's the first next section that Shantideva is debating, conversing, so to say, or Shantideva is problematizing the theistic position, the God-based position, God as the ultimate cause of everything. The next worldview, the next dharma that Shantideva wants to debate is, you could say, it has a God, but its God is more impersonal. It's almost non-theistic, more naturalistic, where it says that there is, this world consists of a spirit force that interacts with material force, then the multiplicity of everything results. Everything then comes into existence. That's the second position. It's important for us. I think I should remind all of you that when we study something like this, especially this chapter 9 of Shantideva, where it's about developing clear understanding. So we often use the word wisdom. I think sometimes wisdom sounds so mysterious. Here is talking about developing clear understanding, clear seeing things as they are, rather than to be carried away by how things appear to be. When we're trying to develop that skill in relation to reading an ancient text, like chapter 9, when we're doing this, because Shantideva, first and foremost, was talking to a particular audience, therefore, he is going to help them arrive at clear understanding by addressing what he knows, right? To be the various sorts of fuzzy understanding to wrong understanding, right? That is prevalent in his own time. So for us to now study something like this, we have to, like it or not, begin at that level. As in to try to understand a little bit Shantideva's audience. What were all the different views that they might have held? And what is Shantideva talking about when he references these views? So that's the first, most obvious thing we need to do when we want to understand chapter 9. But as essential as it is to start with this first step, what is more important is the second step, which is, what is this clear understanding, right, that Shantideva is trying to lead his audience towards? So in that sense, we don't need to get stuck with the details of the first, the first task that we have to do. We don't need to get stuck there. And also, as I've said again and again, I don't have the expertise to really go into all the ins and outs, because then first I have to learn the other system. Then I have to learn what Shantideva thinks about the other system. And then to look at this clear understanding. So we should not, get stuck here in trying to understand the first part and then miss the second part. Our focus should be on the second part to reach clear understanding. So in terms of the second part, reaching clear understanding, then, whatever faults Shantideva points out about the theists, those who believe in God as a first cause, or those who believe in a more naturalistic understanding of how things come to be, I think the second view is closer to maybe what some of us tend to believe. And there's some kind of, undetermined or unclear spirit force, and there's some kind of material force. These two come together and everything now exists. And all the goods and the bads in the world is due to these two forces, at work. We have to see whether it's the God view, whether it's this more natural view, how having these views in us, even without all the technical vocabulary, how sometimes believing that this is how things are might impede our way to really take the Dharma into our hearts and change our hearts and dispel clashes. That is most important. So please translate, and then we'll take our break now. I have to go say good morning to Rinpoche. I'm in Rinpoche's basement right now. I hear him. Okay, I'm back. Thank you for waiting. So, so I think it's really important, yeah, that we look at this not as uh, judging other people's beliefs, not as, oh, we Buddhists are right, those people are wrong, or even in earlier debates, like, oh, Madhyamaka is right, Chittamatra is wrong, oh, Mahayana is right, Hinayana is wrong. It's not about that. If it is about that, then then it has turned into, right, uh, inflating the ego, exaggerating the ego. Then no matter how profound your understanding, it is actually adding poison to the poison we already have. And so this is not the purpose. So 116, 117 is a transition into this question of a God, a single power, external to us, considered as the cause of all causes. Before going into that in 118, 116 and 117, in some way Shantideva is now preparing us to go in that direction. So 116, he says, in everyday perception, we can see that there is a cause for everything. For example, the different segments of the lotus flower arise from a variety of causes. This is 116. But what gives rise, you ask, to such variety of causes? Then the Buddha Dharma's position is an even earlier variety of causes we declare. And how, you ask, do causes give their fruits? through power we answer of preceding causes. So this is again, this is a very simple but really easy to understand explanation of cause and result. So basically, Shantideva's answer is that according to the Buddha, everything we see here arises from preceding causes. These are the results of preceding causes. In these results coming into fruition, we act in certain ways, and how we act create the causes for yet future results. So if you look back, then more causes, more causes, more causes. So now Shantideva is already introducing this thing of there is God as the cause of everything. Because in fact, sometimes, rarely I do this, but sometimes when Christians want to talk to me about God, right? They actually say this, exactly this. Because they know, we Buddhists don't accept, or at least some of them, they know we Buddhists don't accept such a being, such a God. Then they will say, which makes a lot of sense in some ways. They'll say, look at the table. It didn't just happen. The table just didn't exist like this. Somebody made the table. Don't you think so? I said, yes, of course, somebody made the table, and then they're like, but somebody who made the table, where did that somebody come from? Where did the materials for the table come from? Then, so they are leading it so far, I can agree. Yes, of course, that somebody came from his parents, and then parents came from la la la, and then the materials for the table came from, la la la. And eventually they want to arrive at what they call God. They're saying, surely, somebody made all of this. So that sounds reasonable. But what Shantideva is going to say is, hold on. Where did God come from? And you're like, wow, God has always been there. Shantideva said, then your thesis that something always comes from something, now you have thrown out the window. You are just putting a starting point because you are tired of, oh, yeah, oh, it's that, oh, it's that, oh, it's that. So you just gave up and simply assign a starting point and call that God. Basically, this is Shantideva's point. So if you look at 118, it says, if Ishwara is held to be the cause of beings, so during his time, Shantideva's time, many people call this god Ishwara. Ishwara is like Lord. Now, if you ask Hindus, some Hindus might say, oh, Krishna is the god that created everything, the source of everything, or Vishnu, or Brahma, or some will even say Shiva, or some will say the goddess, Shakti. So in Shantideva's time, the people who believe in such a god, they called this force, this being, actually not force. This is a being, not a force. They call this being Ishwara. So he says, if Ishwara is held to be the cause of beings, you must now define for us his nature. Shantideva says, so tell us about this nature of this being, this all-powerful being that caused everything. Tell us about that. So in one explanation of this Ishwara, the answer is that, well, Ishwara is basically the name we give to the great elements: earth, fire, wind, water. That these elements gave rise to this material universe. This is what we call Ishwara. So this is an impersonal God. So first, Shantideva addresses this position. So even among those who use the term Ishwara, some of them will actually say it's actually these elements. We just poetically call the work of these four great elements Ishwara, the Lord. There Shantideva says, in that case, don't waste my time. He says, then basically we're talking about the same thing. you are just more emotional. So you call these interaction of the great elements Ishwara, Lord. He says, in that case, don't waste my time. He says, we're talking about the same thing.
119, he says, but actually, he says, okay, if you want to talk about it, after he says, then don't waste my time, let's not talk about it. In 119, basically, he says, but if you want to talk about it, he says, here is the problem. If you say Ishvara is actually these elements, or these great elements are in fact what we mean by Ishvara. He says, earth and the other elements, there are many, meaning earth is, first you have the four elements. In each of those elements, there are many, many particles, all these earth atoms, wind atoms, fire atoms. And he says there are many. But those of you who believe in Ishvara says Ishvara is one. But the elements are many. Then the other problem is those of you who accept Ishvara, you think of Ishvara as permanent. But all these elements are impermanent. And those of you who accept this Ishvara says Ishvara is the mover, that create the mover, right? But these elements are inert. They themselves don't have this ability to move, to create. And you say Ishvara is divine, meaning powerful, all-powerful. But these elements, they don't have that kind of power. They are trampled underfoot. They are impure. Surely that cannot be your God, he says. This cannot be your all-powerful God, these elements. What he's doing here is basically saying, there's no need, to go this thing, these elements is God, and therefore there is God. Now, what is his problem with this kind of belief? It's basically, it takes the power to act. And in some ways you can say the responsibility to act out of our hands when we think there is an all-powerful force or being that is in charge of things. And that's at the heart of the Buddhist objection to a belief in an all-powerful God. An all-powerful God then means that this God has decided already how things are going to work out. And if this God has not decided yet how things are going to work out, then because this God is all-powerful, then this God has the power to arbitrarily change things when he or she decides to do that. So then again, it turns actions, karma, pointless. It's fatalistic, as we would say. Yes, so here, right, these ancient Indians who believe in this Ishvara, they also have a theory of karma. They also talk about karma. So in their system, there is karma, cause and effect, and human beings, or rather those whom Ishvara created, so not just human beings, even animals, and then the lesser devas and all of that, somehow they create karma and they experience the fruit of karma. But behind all of this, there is another power called Ishvara that is the cause of all of this. So Shantideva is saying, no, 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 no. You can't have both. Karma and yet an all-powerful God that can kind of subvert the workings of karma when he chooses to, because he's all-powerful. Right? It's incompatible to have these two together. Now, I would say this has implications, for us as Buddhists. Even if we are not these ancient Indians who believe in Ishvara and believe in karma at the same time. And I would say, especially those of us who are attracted to Vajrayana, be very careful. Because of the claims of Vajrayana, superficially, sometimes we become this kind of Buddhists. On the one hand, we say we believe in karma. On the other hand, we are hoping, we are thinking there's some all-powerful being that will come and change karma for us. Here, especially Shantideva says, this is not how it is. So on the surface, it might seem like he is kind of debating or refuting or attacking, intellectually attacking, or those Hindus who believe in karma and believe in God. Be careful. We might also have this kind of problem. So this is where studying Shantideva, chapter 9, is useful to us. Because we could be harboring this kind of wrong view hidden in us. Just like his criticism of, like, hey, you say you believe in Ishwara, in this God. And then when I ask you what it is, then you start talking about, oh, it's the elements. It's the elements coming together. That is the power we're talking about. That is God. So he says, you're wasting my time. You're just changing names for the same things that is going on. Likewise, some of us might treat karma itself to be such a thing. Because some of us have a very, I think, fatalistic view of karma. We treat the teachings on karma, on cause and effect, like it is some kind of God. Like, oh, God has determined, karma has fixed. So when we say that karma cannot be subverted, the workings of karma cannot be subverted, the workings of karma cannot be turned upside down, we are not saying that karma cannot be changed. If karma cannot be changed, meaning a particular cause has been created, and this cause will lead to a particular fruition, but it's not saying, this fruition cannot be stopped before it bears fruit. If that was the case, then hopeless, no point for any spiritual practice. There are ways to change, but not by sitting there and praying and hoping, oh, please, God, oh, God, change this, change this. This is not how it works. So anyway, I'll read Shantideva's verses on this, the inconsistencies of believing in such a God, and then also want to talk about karma, and then the problems of thinking, oh, God created everything. Then if God created everything, then how do your actions create anything? Now, basically, he's asking these questions. So 120, the deity, this God, cannot be space. Why? Because space is inert and unproductive. So sometimes people, there are variations of this God belief. One variation is that, oh, they are the great elements. Okay, that doesn't make sense. Shantideva says. Then some might say, oh, this God is space itself. And he says, well, space itself is inert. It's unproductive. Likewise, there are certain maybe fuzzy Buddhist ideas. Some Buddhists have this fuzzy idea that because space is, Buddha says, space is uncompounded. And space is often used as an analogy for the uncompounded nature of mind. And sometimes Buddhists will make the same mistake and think, oh, space must be this nature of mind. Just like, some, those who accept God might say, oh, space must be God. So Shantideva says, no, it cannot be because space is inert, has no power. But your God is all-powerful. And space doesn't produce things. Space might be a necessary condition for things to come into existence, but space itself doesn't produce. The next line says, he cannot be the self. For this we have refuted. I don't remember when Shantideva refuted this. That's the truth. So he says it cannot be the self. We already saw the general position of how self, it doesn't exist, right? So he says, he cannot be the self. For this we have refuted. He's inconceivable, they say. Then Shantideva says, if he is inconceivable, then you cannot say he is the creator because that's conceivable. That's the third line. The fourth line, is there any point, therefore, to such a claim? So he's actually saying, you know, like some of you have this idea of a creator God, but you actually have not thought this through in a clear way. What he's saying is like, you know, you are just looking for something that you can say, oh, he will take care of everything. I'll just be fine. Actually, again, you know, like sometimes some of us say, oh, Guan Yin Pusa, or, you know, Avalokiteshvara, they'll take care of everything. I'll just be fine. Yeah, emotionally, that might be very nice, you know, when you're feeling a lot of suffering. But this is not clear seeing, you know. This is not clear understanding. You're just taking painkillers to delude yourself temporarily. Here, to me, Shantideva is saying, most of the time, you know, when we come up with such beliefs, such ideas, they're really unexamined. They're just kind of emotional responses to things and don't come from clear seeing. He says, 121, what is it that he wishes to create? Has he made the self and all the elements? But are not the self, elements, and he himself all eternal? So here, basically, Shantideva is saying, you know, okay, you say he's inconceivable, but then you also say he's the creator. Now there's already a concept that you can think, oh, he creates. So, okay, now he says, you know, but what is it that he's creating? Did he create the self? Did he create the elements? Don't you also say that all these selves or these souls are eternal? Because in that system, they also believe that the self or the souls are eternal, and the elements are eternal, and Ishvara is eternal. So now basically, Shantideva says, then in that case, there are at least 3 types of things that are eternal. So then, how can one of these 3 types of eternal be the cause of the other types of the other 2 types of eternal things? So he's poking holes at the shaky belief of this particular kind of God. Again, if you look at the details, this particular kind of God may or may not be the God that many people believe in today. So again, it's not a criticism of Christians or Muslims or Hindus. It's not that. Okay, we need to really get this point. Otherwise, again, this turns into arrogance. This is more kind of like for us to take in and say, you know, whenever because of our own confusion, because of our own suffering, and then we start to think, oh, this God, there's this God, or even use a different name. Oh, there's this Buddha, there's this Yidam, you know, there's this great Lama or whatever, will take care of all my problems. Ah, hold on. Have we become theists? And then this last line in 121, and consciousness we know arises from its object. Seems rather random. But I don't want to not read that line and pretend it's not there, but it's there, you know. It seems random, but it's not. Again, really, Shantideva. I try to imagine. You know, he's talking. He's saying. Then he looks over there. He's answering something, right? But it's lost on us now. But in the commentaries, they try to make the connection for us. So if you want to read Khenpo Kumpel's commentary. So again, 122, again, still talking to people who somehow simultaneously believe in karma and then also believe in God, a God figure. And he says, pain and pleasure have from all time sprung from karma. That's the basic position in the Buddhist teachings, and also in actually many Hindu, many Indian religions, all the different types of Hinduism, on Jainism, they all accept pain and pleasure from all time have sprung from karma. Then Shantideva says, so tell us, if that's the case, if we all basically agree on that, then what does this divinity produce? What is the role and the significance of this divinity? And if there's no beginning in the cause, how can there be beginnings in its fruit? Meaning, some of you will say, oh, whereas God is the cause, is the beginning of everything, God itself has no beginning. So this is line 3 and 4, 122. Shantideva is questioning that. If there's no beginning in God, in other words, how can there be beginning in what God supposedly created? That's the logic at play here in 122. (123). He says, if Ishvara relies on nothing but himself as the one who creates, then why are creatures not created constantly? So like, out of nowhere, one chicken will appear, another chicken will appear, another chicken will appear, another chicken will appear. And he says, that's not the case. And if there's nothing that he has not made, what remains on which he might depend? If he has made everything, then, so from the first 2 lines, it says, oh, no. Things don't just, chickens don't just appear from nowhere, because the way God creates is God creates through a male chicken and a female chicken. That's how God creates more chickens. Then line 3 and 4 of 123, he was like, well, in that case, he cannot be said to be the cause of everything. Now he's relying on two other chickens to produce the third chicken. So 124, it says, if God has to depend, right? For a third chicken to appear, God has to depend on two chickens, and it has to be a male and a female chicken. And he says, if then God depends on something, then this cause of all is nothing but the meeting of conditions, and therefore not Ishwara. Ishwara, I said translate as Lord, but more literally it means the self-sufficient one. So now the self-sufficient one is no longer self-sufficient. It has to rely on other things. And he says, if that's the case, then we're talking about causes and conditions. Again, why? Why the need to romanticize, to say, oh, there's God, there's this all-powerful God, when all we're talking about is simply the workings of causes and conditions, which is, of course, the Buddhist position. So then the rest of 124, he says, when these obtain, meaning when the conditions come together, it's like Ishwara has no choice. Things will get created. And when these conditions are absent, Ishwara cannot make a third chicken. If the preceding cause of a male and a female chicken aren't there. 125 is the final verse dealing with this God. It says, does God create out of a desire to create? If God creates out of a desire to create, then that desire is his boss. Then he is not all powerful. But if you say, oh no, God doesn't have this desire. God just naturally, automatically creates. It doesn't have this desire. Because you already asked him, if God has desire, and if God has desire, then desire is controlling God. Then desire is the real God. And it's like, oh, no. God has no desire. God just creates. And then Shantideva turns this around and say, well, in that case, he is powerless because without desire, he is being forced to create. So we now we have completed this section on this thing called God. So the take-home lesson here is, again for me, it's just like, we should examine more carefully in our own minds, in our own attitudes. And like I said, at the end of the day, this is not like, finding fault with, other religions. This, I feel, is really talking about, let's see if we, so-called Buddhists, actually entertain some of these fuzzy views, unclear ideas. And if we do, we have to see the kind of the implications of these kind of cloudy views and work on dispelling these types of contradictory beliefs. Yeah. So whether Shantideva's arguments or logic used here is effective or not, as in convincing or not, that I leave it to you. But from here, we can see that what he's emphasizing is, for those of us who accept the Buddha Dharma, we have to remember that karma, causes and conditions, is how we understand where suffering and happiness comes from. Not some God, some external entity, some external being. And that karma, cause and effect, causes and conditions, interdependence. When we understand this, then we can work within this understanding to overcome suffering and to achieve happiness. Yes, so today we're going to end here. Then Saturday we will have class. This next section on the Sankhya system, I think Shantideva makes it easier for us. It's not so all over the place. He presents, a basic understanding of Sankhya, then before he starts to kind of question some of these beliefs. So a little smoother, I would say, the next section. Changchu sem choren poche ma ge banam ge gyuche ge banyam pa me bhayam gone gong du be Okay, ta-ta, you all.